Call this joint Buildings and Ground Finance Committee to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have two residents requesting to address the board. Just a reminder, the board provides a time of public comment at committee meetings for residents and taxpayers to bring their thoughts on specific agenda items to the board, but it is not a time for exchange between the board, administration, and the speaker. We ask speakers to refrain from identifying specific students, staff, or community members by name. Each resident is provided up to 3 minutes to speak at a committee meeting on a topic identified on the meeting agenda. Residents and taxpayers who are interested in making public comments must complete the electronic registration form prior to 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting. We have two to address the meeting. Mr. Graham, you want to introduce them?
Our first speaker this evening is Caleb Vest, who will be followed by Aaron Small.
Good evening. I'm going to try things a little differently this time. Instead of reading from prepared notes, which I then email you, I now am going to actually try and make eye contact with you all. So I've had a lot of thoughts about the budget conversations that have been going on. And I personally feel like this board isn't making making plans that will be good for the district in the long term. You know, we're negotiating a new teacher's contract and, you know, needing to be able to provide for those raises. I'm hoping that whomever is on that committee is, you know, bargaining in good faith and being fair and open-minded with the teachers, while also taking into account the financial needs of the district. The other problems, you know, we have lots of building programs coming out. So where I'm getting at with this is there's a lot of money that needs to be coming out, which means we need more money coming in. And obviously there's really only two ways for us to get that. There's third grants, applying to other stuff. And obviously the administration's doing a great job looking for those, applying for them. But one is local income taxes, which I understand the reluctance in not wanting to raise those very high. What I would ask the board to consider is whatever your gut check comfort level number is, consider going 0.5% higher, maybe 1% higher, so that minor bit of discomfort, I think now will help us in the future to not have as big of a painful gut check when suddenly we need to do more than we can afford. Additionally, I feel like everyone in this room, not just the board members, the staff, audience members, anyone listening on Zoom, we need to be banging down the door of our legislators, because realistically, they kicked the can into our court, and now we're the ones who have to make up that difference. Regardless of whether or not you feel that the BEFC recommendation is the right way to go, we need to go and talk to them and say, look, if you don't like this plan, then come up with a better plan. And I would encourage everyone to go and talk to them. That's one thing that I'm going to try and do over the next few weeks, is to go and talk and say, we need to fix this. Thank you for your time.
Aaron Small.
Good afternoon. I'm going to echo a lot of the same points that Caleb just did, but I did prepare remarks for this evening's meeting based on discussion from the last meeting where language related to a public resolution was discussed by the board. I had hoped to urge you to come to consensus, but But not seeing that item on tonight's agenda, I turned my attention to next year's budget instead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I make a point of order?
Sure.
In relation?
Go
to-
ahead.
I was going to make a motion to amend the agenda to put, the resolution should have been on this agenda, as for some reason it's not. But the modified resolution, I was going to make a motion to amend the agenda to put
Mr.
that
Keyhoe.
on here, which would then make Mrs. Small's remarks in order.
Mr. Keener, just to point out something, there was in board news or when Mr. Boberski sent out a copy of his revised.
Yeah, that's what I
resolution.
have.
Yeah, but if you also read in there, he was going to put it on there. He said, if anyone is interested in this, please respond by May 24th, and no one responded.
Okay. I don't recall that piece, Mr. Donato. I'm sure it was there. But my recollection very distinctly from the last meeting was that the board came to a consensus around the modified language. And speaking for myself, I probably saw that and read it as, do you have any concerns with this? And since it perfectly encapsulated what we had decided, I had no concerns and therefore did not reach out. Now that maybe that's on me, but I'm fine with putting this on here, with amending the agenda and putting this on. And I think frankly, we owe it to the community because that's what we told them we were going to do. And this is language that reflects an overwhelming majority support from the board, at least based on the last meeting. Well,
I think so you've made a motion to,
yeah, I would make a motion to amend the agenda to add as an item of new business, approval of the modified school funding resolution such as was contained in the May 20th edition of Board News. And I do have a copy of it here if anyone needs to pull that up.
I for one, I don't remember all the dates. Do we have a deadline when we have to approve the resolution? And-
No.
And I haven't gone through it, studied it with a fine tooth comb, the changes. So I'm not really prepared to take that on tonight
Yeah, the changes
at all.
at the policy and education meeting on the 16th on Thursday. I believe it was Mr. Keener who brought up asking for a revised version. And Mr. Boberski sent out that revised version the next day. We had it Friday evening, I believe. So, I mean, if we need more time, yeah.
But I'm just saying because it wasn't on the agenda,
Mhm.
I did
Didn't
not
prepare.
put any prep into it like I typically do for any agenda items. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I put prep into it and then it wasn't there, so I was,
Well, and
I was concerned.
sure, that's fine. I'm just letting you know.
I
I
actually
feel
was
about
surprised to see that it wasn't there as well. My recollection from that last meeting was that it would be on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And I remember asking the question, will both the original and the updated be available for discussion at tonight's meeting? And the answer I got was yes, and that was during the public meeting. So I did talk to Mr. Boberski today. He explained to me the same thing that Mr. Donato said, that in his email, he asked for feedback. He did, he sent me that copy. I reread it, but to be honest, I also interpreted it the way you did, that if you have a problem, let me know. I think the public agreement was that we would discuss it tonight and vote on it tonight. We do not have a deadline, but as the legislators are going into session in June, the sooner we do something, the greater the impact it could have. If we continue to stall, we lessen any potential impact. I realize a lot of people I shouldn't say it that way. I realize some people don't feel that it's maybe necessary because the impact may not be great, but the impact might be great. So therefore, I think we should do all we can. There's nobody here, I think, that wouldn't like
So I
our
think,
district to
I
have
think,
more funding.
I think the question right now is just a motion whether we discuss it.
Correct.
We're not determining whether we're going to approve it or not. So if somebody has a second to that motion, and then we can vote to whether we're going to discuss it tonight. Is that, unless you feel we shouldn't based on,
We have to open it up for public
Right, and that
comment.
was why I'm tying that's why I took the liberty of injecting a point of order for that exact reason, because Mrs. Small appeared to be ready to discuss it. So, and that would fulfill that requirement.
so you're okay with that, Mike?
Yeah, but if there was a second,
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion about the motion? We've already had a lot. So all those in favor? Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor, 8, and 1 opposition. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that an agenda item. I guess it would be in the finance. Somewhere in the finance. Where are we going to put it, I guess, question?
I said new business, but Mr. Chair, you put it wherever you feel is appropriate.
That's fine. We'll put it in new business.
Okay.
should,
Okay.
in fairness to.
So now,
Would you like? to
we
keep
stopped you at
discussing
2:20.
and Start your 3 minutes over again?
I mean.
we
that's
stopped you
fine.
at 2:28, so you
But
you
in
got,
fairness, and if you two would like to have public comment, because that, we have to do that too.
You'd have to reopen it because the agenda, public comment closed at 3 before the agenda was
Yes.
modified.
Agreed,
Right, but we
Mr.
can,
Graham.
we could ask, as a general rule, as a point of order, you can ask those present if they wish to speak.
Yeah,
to the
I think
modified
we
agenda.
have to have, we have to allow public, if we don't vote for anything.
You have to open it up again.
Yeah,
So you can change what you want to talk about, right?
we can start the 3
We
minutes
can just
over.
do
again.
that.
Sounds good.
3 minutes or we go to 2?
I would be in favor of allowing Mrs. Small to restart her.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
It's fine, because I don't really, it's a good thing I printed out my other one too. Yeah, so to that end, I want to express my disappointment in the overall tenor of the discussion, that adopting a resolution really has no impact, nor any power to influence lawmakers. So I do understand that it can feel frustrating to not have your concerns listened to. However, I think it's important to keep your own positions of leadership in the community in mind and the message that you're sending to residents, so that they are then empowered to take action on their own. If the goal is we want our residents to be out speaking to their lawmakers. I was at Representative Miller's office this morning. He was very open to having conversation with me. I've been in Senator Ahmet's office as well. But if our goal is to encourage our community members to go out and take those actions, I think it's important that we take a leadership, that you all take that leadership role as well. If we play into the idea of political gridlock being beyond our control, the chances of it ever improving are pretty slim. So part of the discussion I heard was that you were going to remove the specificity, some of the points of specificity from the resolution that was proposed. I'm going to advocate for passing a resolution that proactively advocates for measures that help Hempfield. And the measures that were adopted by both the majority, or the recommendations that came out of the BEFC, all of them, both the majority and the minority agreed on correcting volatility, resetting the base rate, adjusting for poverty, and addressing adequacy. The minority did not address that in any specific way. However, it did acknowledge that it is necessary. My concern with leaving those specific points off were the recommendations of the BEFC, or then you leave it open to our lawmakers to come up with their own plan that may not help Hempfield quite as much. So that would be my reason for advocating to keep those 3 points in the language. One specific change I would propose is that there's a mention of $9.4 million for Hempfield in the first point, and that should be moved to point 2 for accuracy. That figure comes from adequacy payments, not from the recalculated basic education. So resetting the base does help with volatility, but does not address adequacy. So that figure actually belongs in point 2. It was suggested that you remove point 3. Reconstituting the BEFC in 2029 is already a matter of law. So it's necessary to review and evaluate whether the formula is working. So there's really no point in removing point 3. So this board has some very difficult decisions.
Get your 3 minutes.
And I just hope that you'll be looking at all sources of funding to make sure that those funds are there.
Thanks for the public comments, and I apologize. Mr. Wohlgemuth should have started this meeting because finance is first, so I'm going to give him the gavel.
That's okay. We'll move right into the finance portion of the meeting and move into the budget update. Mrs. Hall?
Do we need to ask if there's any other public comment because we added something on the agenda?
Oh, you want to do that now
Yeah.
or before the new
I think it would
business?
Be good, yeah.
All right. So I guess I'm just going to open this up for anyone online or anyone here present. Do you have any public comment on the addition of the new business item and the adoption of this resolution for consideration tonight that was added? All right, Mr. Best, you have 3 minutes.
So really I think regardless of what the language is, you need to pass something tonight because as Mrs. Brady mentioned, legislature is coming back into session. We need to get our voices out there to tell them that this needs to get done so that it can be passed for next year's budget. And to echo what Mrs. Small mentioned, the more specific, probably the better. But if nothing else, we need to say something. We need to say, look, do this because we need it. Our district needs it. We have lots of needs that are not being met financially by our local tax base. And honestly, no one in this room wants the tax increases to go up to where it would need to be to get all the stuff done that we need. So we need to get other sources of funding, which comes from the state. If certain numbers are left out, that I think would be okay, as long as it would be forceful enough that it's very clear that, look, if you don't like this calculation that the majority report came up with, then you need to come up with a much better calculation that provides as much or more, which was something that was brought up in the last meeting where, somebody said, well, what if we can get more from some other formula? And that's fine, but no other group of legislators have proposed a formula that gives us more. In fact, they haven't proposed any formula, and that's part of the problem. So please pass something and continue to fight for the state to give us more money. Thank you.
All right, any other speakers? Okay, hearing none, we will move into the finance committee meeting, and we'll start with the budget update from Mrs. Hall.
Thanks, Mike. So this is a relatively brief presentation. The information's more or less the same as last month, except for the fact that we've gotten information on our homestead farmstead exclusion, which I'll talk about. The next slide. Just as an overview of the budget, these are kind of the iterations that we've gone through this spring in the budget. And with the 3.5% tax increase, we are at break even with revenues and expenditures at 150 million and change. Next. In that, it's a 3.5% tax increase. And because we did only need 1.8 something to balance. The rest went into capital reserve. So I have 1.49 million of this budget going into capital reserve. The other expenditures are the same ones we've been talking about through the process. Next slide. Our homestead farmstead allocation is significantly larger this year due to gaming revenues. So it's up about 400,000. So that means anyone who has an approved application is going to receive approximately $195 reduction of their real estate taxes. It was about 160, can't remember, 160, I have it on the next slide, 160 last year. So that's going to help offset some of the tax increase that we're looking at as well, since the rebate will be higher this time. I don't know for sure that the number will be 195. It should be that, but we'll have the certified number of homestead and farmsteads by June 1st from the county so that we can calculate that out. Next slide. Just going back through our tax scenarios, 3.5 is highlighted because that is where we ended. And just so you can see with the additional exclusion, it's going to reduce it a little bit further. So while it's 122, it's going to feel like a little less because we do have additional exclusion from last year, additional $31 per homestead farmstead that is approved. Next, just bringing the slide back, we are on track with the 3.5%. If you look at the bottom section, which is the $150 million debt service, not that we couldn't do more, but at least we are starting to trend this in the right direction. So we'll bring this back, every year as we start to plan long-term how we're going to pay for the building projects and things that we need to have done. So that the 3.5 actually does really help keep us on the 150. Next. So all we have left this week now is to publish our notice of intent to adopt the final budget at the June 11th board meeting. Unless there are any other changes, it will go through as it is done in the preliminary form in the last board meeting with 3.5% tax increase. Any questions?
I do.
Sure.
I'd like a little bit more understanding on the homestead. Obviously, as a homeowner, we always like getting that.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, since it's much more than we were expecting, is there a way that with that offsetting a tax increase, could we re-offset it in the opposite direction so that the feels like is the same?
So you as a board can do, whatever you would like in terms of a tax
Asking for-
increase.
I'm just asking, is my logic
I understand what
accurate
you're saying,
there?
which is
Yeah.
why I tried to show that, because last time we talked about it, it was going to feel like $122 on the average home. But now it's going to be more like 91 because there is a little incremental relief from the homestead farmstead because
Right.
the gaming revenues were so high this year.
Right.
So I do see what you're saying. So that's
so
kind of
what
why I
does
left
that-
that out.
What does that delta equate to in, say, percentage points of? Like, is it the 2 million? So we're at at 900,000
It's 900,000 a percent.
right?
So the additional is really $31 per homestead farmstead for the year. So if you're looking, it's really the difference between, it's probably about, not quite a percent,
Not
or just slightly less than a percent that someone would feel the difference
If
is
we-
in the average home.
If you go back to the previous slide, if we're getting $400,000 more, that would be a little less than the
half a percent. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
but it's also divided out by the number of homestead farmsteads, so that really depends on the number. We have about 12,660. So
I
that's
guess what I'm
gonna
saying is
vary.
if it's like a little less than half a percent to
Yeah,
add that
this
back
isn't-
on
this
to keep the
isn't a
same
tax
feels
relief
like.
For everyone, you have to apply.
You have to apply for it, right? So
Right.
I said we have a
Not-
little over 12,000 homes that do qualify and are approved as a rejection. So it would not apply to everybody, to Mike's point.
And
but-
my understanding is it doesn't apply to business and it does apply to primary residence. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
Yeah, I think you are correct.
This is just because I have no idea. So if it applies to 12,000 residents, do we have information on how many have applied and gotten it in the past? Or how
So
does that
we
work?
we know every year what the file is, so they'll send us a file on June 1st telling us how many people have applied and are approved.
But
I mean, once you apply, you're in there.
Yeah, historically, do we know?
I mean, I can get that information from the
That-
county, but I don't know. I mean, I've only been in
Yeah.
this job for a year, so.
That would just
I
be
don't know.
interesting because like you said, it's something that's applied for, so.
Yeah, so I mean. we
I don't know who
passed-
takes advantage of it.
So I
who
mean, it
doesn't.
would be in board documents because we have to pass a resolution and in it, it will say how many homesteads and farmsteads.
Okay.
So I mean, that information is publicly available. It's just a matter of me going back and getting it.
Yeah, anything historical, I think, I don't know how many years, maybe like whatever you do with the budget, how you go back. You know.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to approve the resolution every year. So we're going to have those.
Okay.
You know.
Great.
For the last number of years. It's pretty close to what it was last year. Our homestead farmstead number isn't much different. We were maybe 1 or 2 homes different.
Oh.
So far, I mean, we only have preliminary numbers right now.
Could we go back to, you said that we were set on a trajectory for debt service? Is that
So I
what
laid
you're
out
saying?
the different scenarios if we were going to borrow 200 million, or if we're going to borrow 150 million. So if you
Mhm.
look at the bottom section, the way Raymond James had explained it, that if you want to do it over 4 years, what you'd want to do is put 1.65 into debt service, which is exactly what we did this year.
Mhm.
Because we needed that 1.85 to balance the budget. So it actually
Mhm.
worked out very nicely. The 3.5 keeps us
Mhm.
on target for that. You know, we can always extend it out more than 4 years. It can be more than 150 million, but at least we're on target for that bottom borrowing scenario.
Would it be smarter for our tax increase to be 4% instead of, or 3.8 instead of 3.5?
I'm not going
Maybe
to
the
comment.
That's
on
a
the
loaded,
board.
that's a loaded
But
question,
definitely.
Mrs. Johnson.
Well, I realize that, and just looking for strategic planning in the future, because we're planning to spend a lot of money and borrow a lot of money. I mean, like, I mean, I can't even say how many millions. I mean, it just sort of sticks in my mouth, but I mean, millions. So strategically, because that's something that we have tried to do over the years with finance, and maybe we've fallen short of that sometimes.
Well, I guess I would say that that's a good additional increase to leverage and enable us to borrow more for the next 4 or 5 years, but we don't even know what we're borrowing yet. We're guessing 150 million. If we need more, doesn't mean we can't do that, because we're not going to build this borrowing ability in 1 year. So I would say, no, it doesn't help us strategically to go to 4% versus 3.5.
I think it does if I'm considering any kind of anything, no matter the cost, 1.5 or the million number that you just said is a lot. I think anything you do on the front end to save for that and to have that is long-term planning and fiscally responsible. I don't think it's 0.5%. It's not asking for.
It's
way
not the
more.
additional money you're putting away, it's your ability to borrow, and it's going to come over 4 or 5 years.
And I think we'll still have that ability to borrow, and I don't think we'll lose.
So
any rating.
that's the only reason you would do it. I don't think you need to do that, overburden the taxpayers. We haven't even figured out how much we're going to borrow yet. And we're putting this 3.5% tax increase thinking we're going to. This project may not even get approved. We don't know yet.
I don't think 0.5% is overburdening the taxpayers. So
Well, that's not what you think, but taxpayers, 70% of the community that don't have students and are wondering why are we doing this massive project may not agree with you on that.
no, and that's opinion. And that's why like bringing these numbers back that Mrs. Hall just brought back about the homestead relief and things like that, like my eyes went right away to, because I know I was thinking of it in half percentages and what's that's going to cost for the median household. And right away, the 4% didn't even hit the 122 that was there before. It's still below. So that small increase is still below the 122, where if you went to the 5%, it's now at 144. But that again sits better with me for like the long-term planning, where then years ahead, we're not having, I think one of the community members said it, that unsettling feeling of, what do we do now or what do we take away? You know what I mean? That forefront planning, I think, is really important. And to do it in small increments, if that's, where the board wants to go, I think is,
I actually like the fact that this homestead's going to give us more money. So the 3.5's not going to overburden the taxpayers as much as it was. So it gives them a little break. So now we get a break. So you're going to sock it back up to 4%, and you could have saved the taxpayers a little bit. I look at it quite differently.
I think last month, I remember certain persons using the terms, this number just feels good to me. It feels like that's a good number. And I think we need to be a little bit more, not so much on feeling, but the what is and what do we need? And if we go with feelings, the homestead, if it's roughly 0.5%, if you look at the 2027 number, 27-28 number of the 150 million debt service, add 0.5% to that, if I'm interpreting this correctly, you're up to the same number as the $200 million debt service on the upper level. And I am really doubtful that 150 million is going to be enough for all the things that are on the table for us. to
Remember,
address.
how much do we have in the capital reserves, Mrs.?
Right.
Oh.
So we've got about 50 million right now with the 2 borrowings that we've done, and we're also going to be putting in that additional money, the 1.5.
And how, it's 1.5 million?
That's how much we will have for this, the extra millage that we're building in
Mhm.
will be 1.5. That'll go right to capital reserve because we don't have any debt to be paying back at this point,
Mhm.
aside from those that we've already budgeted for the $2 $15 million bonds that we've taken.
Just so I'm clear, we've got 50 million now, and
Yep.
we're gonna put
149.
1.4, 1.5 in that reserve
Correct.
this fiscal year.
The 24, 25, yes.
Yeah, and then we're gonna be borrowing incrementally.
Well, at some point, we're going to know what we're going to be spending. And that point, then we'll start to look at our borrowing. And you don't borrow it all at once just because there's phasing to projects. So we'll have to, we'll have a better idea at that
Mhm.
point, what that's going to look like.
My comment would be that the administration has looked at these numbers. We've looked at these numbers. I'm not in the business of taxing the taxpayers more than what's required to run the district safely and comfortably. And after looking at these numbers, after hearing from Mrs. Hall and looking at our presentation, I feel very comfortable with where we are at the 3.5%.
I can stay 3.5, but I do want to clarify, I'm very concerned. I'm a taxpayer. I'm very concerned about the future of what we're doing as well, just because I want to look at the possibility of increasing does not mean that I am not concerned about our budget and how we spend our money. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I want us to be strategically positioned to do what we need to do because we are not just looking at renovations. We are looking at major building projects. We haven't approved them yet, and maybe we don't approve them, but we do want to look at strategic planning, and that's something that we've talked about through the years. I've been on the board almost 6 years now. And now it's like, are we really strategically well-placed?
Mrs. Johnson, I think we are. By putting, in fact, I would not have approved a 3.5% tax increase if we weren't looking to increase the taxes enough to build ourselves up to borrow a large amount of money. And we put that in the budget this year. So we are strategically preparing because the majority of the money is going to be borrowed. So, I agree with Justin. We've gone through this. Now that we get a little more back to the taxpayers, I don't think it makes sense to go up to 4%.
Mr. Morris Charles, I wanted the opportunity to express my viewpoint and to ask questions, legitimate questions about where we're going and what we've clarified. And you know how I have voted on tax increases over the years. I mean, I voted for 0, I voted for 1%. a variety depending on what's going on the years. I'm a taxpayer, I'm retired, I'm on a fixed income. I'm not excited about more taxes, just to be clear. But I do want to just be able to ask questions so that I'm perfectly clear about our strategic position, where we're going with that, so I can have a level of understanding about what we're doing. And I think it's fine that I ask those questions. I'm not looking for tons of like a huge increase or anything like that. I'm just finishing basically a conversation that I thought we had last time we had this discussion. Asking questions that I didn't quite get in that night. I don't know, maybe we were here till 10 o'clock. I don't know. Anyway, I want to be able to ask these questions and to get a fair answer. And so I appreciate all the work that you've done, Mrs. Hall, and the administration and the Finance Committee. I just wanted to ask questions and ask if that's something we need to reconsider. That's all.
Mr. Keener, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hall, am I correct that we've already passed a resolution approving the posting of the preliminary budget, right?
You did, yes.
Okay, and that has to be posted for how long?
10 days.
10 days?
Yes.
Okay, so we still have time.
Yep.
The board debated this extensively in a previous meeting. So far as I can tell, very little has changed since that. I know we all have slightly different viewpoints on this subject, but I feel comfortable with where we landed, and unless a majority of the board is in favor of changing that, I don't know how helpful it is for us to continue to revisit an issue that we've already decided.
I was assured at that meeting that it was somewhat, I don't know what the correct word is, non-official but official in coming to that resolution, and that we just needed to have something to post and it could always be changed until June. And so it went through with the understanding that it could still be changed. And I think having the conversation is valid. I don't think we're wasting time having a conversation about the number and whether it could be increased, whether it should be increased. Yes, the majority of future construction and renovations will be borrowed, but that has to be paid back. And so the less we have to borrow, it's less of a burden on future years of taxpayers to pay back 150 million or 200 million. If we begin that process now by building more in to our capital reserves so that it is tempered over those many years rather than hitting it 5 years from now and 6 years from now and 7 years from now in order to start paying that back. My assertion would be that because we have gotten, or homeowners specifically who pay school taxes have gotten a little bit of a gift in the homestead rebates, that maybe this is the time that it won't feel the hurt as much as if we waited 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road when that might be different. And we could take advantage of that extra 0.5% now and build it in and begin that leveling off process.
I don't want to stifle the discussion around this, but I think we can move this along a little bit if we determined, is there a majority desire to revisit this? What we've approved as a preliminary budget and a preliminary tax increase of 3.5%. So I think we just need to understand if those that agreed to this preliminary budget have had a change of heart at all. As I recall, Mrs. Brady, you were suggesting 6.3%. Mrs. Eshelman, you were suggesting 6.3%, and Mr. Donato, you were suggesting 6.3%. So I guess the question is to others,
3.5%.
are you interested in revisiting that 3.5%? And if there's not a desire to do that by the majority of the board, I think we can move forward. And again, I don't want to stifle discussion, but I think we could be here for a long time. to your point, Mr. Keener, rehashing this. So I do not have a desire to revisit this. So I think you know where I stand. I'm comfortable with where we are. I wouldn't lower taxes and put the district at financial risk at the expense of that, but we've been doing, in my opinion, a very excellent job of managing our expenses, looking for grant opportunities, and also appropriately raising taxes to plan for the future. And we've been doing that since I've been on this board for the last 2+ years.
I'll be quick. So to Mrs. Brady, Mrs. Johnston, I'm with you. I think, in terms of the discussion, I think it's a healthy discussion. I think it can be argued that this is probably one of the most important things that this board does. Top 2, 3, 4 things for sure. Some would argue it is the most important thing that a board does. So I think the discussions are good. I think that the questions are valid, and I think they should be asked. If we don't ask them, I think we're selling ourselves short. With that said, I am comfortable personally at the 3.5 number. I'd be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't thinking about what 3.8 or 4 would look like. That did cross my mind, Mrs. Johnston, quite honestly. But I think Mr. Wogan summed it up pretty well. 3.5 is where I sit comfortably at this moment. But I think the discussion's a good one. But I know for me, 3.5 is the number I'm good with.
Yeah, whenever there's new information presented, and I appreciate that from our administration, I think it's imperative that we discuss it.
I'm obviously still at 3.5.
I'm willing to go with the will of the board. I just wanted to be able to voice and extend the discussion because I didn't feel like I had a chance to do that previously. Privately, we had some discussions, but not just 1 or 2 people. So whatever the will of the board is for this. And like I said, I have confidence in our finance committee and in our Ms. Hall and Karen and what she does.
This is not on here as an action item. So it would only change if there's a desire from the majority to make some adjustments. Mr. Garber, I think we know where Mrs. Brady stands. I think I know where Mr. Keener stands. Unless you want to
To be,
reiterate
cl-
that.
go on, to be clear, I'm comfortable where we land.
I'm
sorry.
comfortable where we landed at. No, I don't see any changes from my perspective of where we had talked about before, so I'm comfortable there.
All right, I think it's safe to say we can continue this discussion. I think it's safe to say that the majority of the board is still comfortable, moving forward with our preliminary budget to date. So any other discussion on this topic at all? Any other questions for Mrs. Hall? Okay, oh, sorry. All right, hearing none, then we'll move on to the contracts. We have a number of contracts for review. These are not up for approval tonight, but if I'm correct, they will be on the next regular scheduled board meeting on June 11th. So now's the time to talk about them, discuss them. You will notice when you open up the summary for review, that 2 of these are renewals and 4 of these are new. So I'll just open this up for discussion and any review of these contracts by anyone that I see. The people that originated the contracts are not necessarily here. So if there's anything that the administration wants to add to these, we'll take it. Any questions about any of these?
I just had a question more of curiosity. The dance DJ for Centerville Middle School, that's for both the middle schools. Is that
There's
correct?
one on there for
Separate.
Centerville and for Landis.
CMS and LMS.
That's what I was asking.
Yep.
It's for both stuff.
One
Both.
One each.
Yeah, 1,080 apiece.
Both. It just says Centerville. No, below it says Ellen.
There's a second one.
There's a
Second one
column.
below it for Landisville.
My mistake, sorry.
They, we'll add for this because it's a long time ago, but the cost for this is actually fairly good. Really is good because I remember it's back at in my teaching career, being involved with student council and having middle school dances, and was not that much cheaper than this. So they really getting a lot
Or the
bang for their bucks in that case.
I have a fundamental question. Under the amount of the contract, is that an annual amount? I'm assuming it is. I guess I can even ask you, Mr. Graham, for the first two. Is that our annual amount? Like for Microsoft?
Hang on, let me bring up the, you're talking about on the summary page?
Yes.
Yes, those are both annual amounts.
So would that be true for Pitney Bowes as well? Because that shows that's a 5-year contract, a CoStar contract.
That's for the whole contract for 5 years.
Okay, so that 20,000 is 5 years.
Or $4,006.86
Makes
every year.
sense, because it looks like it's 333.89 a month. All right, I just want to be clear, we're looking at those numbers correctly under the amount of the contract, because some of them are annual and some of them are for the 5 years.
And the Microsoft one the renewal numbers essentially kept our yearly cost of Microsoft flat, but if we add additional licenses for like Microsoft Project or something, that causes some fluctuation with that. But that's the number that's in there for a placeholder.
That's actually a very good number.
Yeah, that number does include the home use benefits for all faculty and staff for Microsoft Office, as well as everything the district uses.
Okay, because I know that sometimes at the IU, we actually get it cheaper if we go by ourselves. So I don't know the number. So is this a good, like, no, we were talking about the transportation with the fuel and some.
Are you talking about Microsoft?
Yeah, just because, yeah, the Microsoft. contract.
Microsoft, that's a really good contract
Yeah,
with them. I can tell you that from the private sector, that's for a nonprofit. They are very good to nonprofit organizations. That would be a lot more in the real world.
Yeah, the IU negotiates that for the entire state.
Yeah.
Microsoft will not sell that to us directly.
Yeah.
You have to go through a reseller.
Yeah, I have no worries about that. Even though it looks like a big number. The Pitney Bowes, can somebody share with that? That's a new one. And that looks like it's coming out of the business office. I thought maybe you could share a little bit. It looks like that's a lease of a mailroom postage meter. And
That's
that we
exact-
haven't had in the past.
No, we need a new one.
Oh, we need
Yeah.
another one. Okay, is that with the same company though?
We've had Pitney Bowes before, yes.
Okay.
Does that all go through just one here at central office, or are there multiple machines throughout the district?
There's just one here in central office.
Okay. I don't mean this might come across the wrong way, but did we work on that contract and ask them to sharpen their pencil? Do we do that with each one?
Yeah, so this one was handled by our purchasing agent. and So
Okay.
that's his whole job.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then it is not a lot, but I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Peter had a
No,
Go
I was
ahead.
just- Are you done with it? Because I have a question about the Pitney Bowes.
No, go ahead. Yep, you can ask.
It just, I don't pretend to be an expert on stamping machines, but $333 a month sounds like a car payment to me. I mean, that's expensive for a machine that just puts a stamp on something. I mean, it's the machine, we all walk past it every time.
Are you volunteering to come do that for the district?
Pardon me?
Are you volunteering to come do that for the district?
No, I'm just trying to understand. I mean,
I
that's,
agree with you.
it seems like a lot of money. And I mean, maybe if are we better off just buying the thing?
So I don't think they last forever, and I think the
I'm sorry?
technology changes as well. Am I wrong? Yeah.
No,
Would
they
you
don't
agree?
last forever. I
It's
mean,
like-
this is something that's running,
Yeah.
thousands of pieces of mail
Yes.
throughout the course of the year through there. And I believe the lease also includes the maintenance on it. So if
It
it
does.
needs a software update, if it breaks, someone literally comes in and fixes it, no questions asked during that period.
Right, like what would it cost to buy that machine with a service contract? Because essentially what we're doing right now is 300 a month. We're basically spending about what, 15,000 on it over the course of the years?
20,
A year,
20, it's on there
20,000 overall.
over
Okay.
5 years. I mean, I don't have that information off the top of my head. I'm happy to get it for you. Like,
I
don't know
would,
what it
I would
costs.
be curious about that. And maybe it's a great deal. I don't know. It just struck me as high.
We
For
do
a
get our,
relatively simple piece of equipment that's.
we do get our money's worth out of it. I'll leave it at that.
Grant's thinking of like, why are we spending any money when all I have to do is just go and put it on a
Come on in.
envelope? That's what I do at home. And why doesn't it work?
Well, we could come in and volunteer that. We handed out diplomas last week. We could come in and volunteer our time.
We'll pay you $200 a month
stamping
to do that.
envelopes As well.
All right, any other
I would
questions?
just be curious about that extra data.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look into it. I've never bought a postage machine, so I don't have an answer for you, but I can find out.
I don't think, I'll just add this. I don't think that's far off, just based on knowing where we're at with the one that we have outside of the district. So I did have to ask, though, if it was truly a new contract. It doesn't sound like it's truly a new contract, even though it's new. It is a piece of equipment that we've had and we've used. That was really the intent of my question.
Yep.
And I always would expect that whenever you go into a new contract, you negotiate that rate down. They always leave wiggle room there. And you can always, if you don't come back and bargain with them, I can tell you they'll be happy because they expect you to. So, as long as I know we're doing that with every contract, I'm comfortable with it. Any other questions on the contracts? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. I think we have one action item here tonight. And that financial action item is the resolution. It's a public school facility grant. Do you want to talk at all about that, Mrs. Hall, before we take action on this?
Sure. So this is a grant. We've talked about it a little bit when we've talked about the feasibility study. It is through the DCED. The deadline is this week and you have to have a resolution approved, which is why it's on as an action item tonight. They have a number of things that you can request a grant for, and the top one they had on there was roof work. So we put together LMS and LPC. You can ask for up to 75% of the project with a cap of 5 million. So we got the quotes in, we've got our narrative, we're ready to go. We just need the resolution to be able to apply to see if we can get some of that money to pay for 75% of the roof work at the two buildings.
And as you can see on the resolution, we'd be asking for a grant of about $3.5 million from the Commonwealth Financing Authority.
You know when those are decided upon and approved?
So they said the fall, but then we heard August. So, I mean, we're hopeful because we'd like to schedule it for next summer. So we're hoping to hear sooner than later.
There's really no downside to this grant unless there would be some kind of stipulation, but I can't imagine what that would be on a roofing project. So I get a little more nervous when we're talking about grants for materials. That will be the gift that keeps on giving. And that's where those grants can get a little costly in the long run, where all of a sudden you fall off the cliff and it becomes your responsibility. But this one seems harmless and there's only an upside from everything that I see. That accurate, Mrs. Hall?
Correct.
So I'll need a motion and a second.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. Second? Who seconded that? All right, Mrs. Echelman, second. And so I'll need a vote if you're in favor of adopting this grant so we can get that submitted. All in favor? All right, that's 9-9 in favor. Thank you. And I believe that ends the Finance Committee. So
The resolution we're going to talk about new
I
business.
thought we were going to keep that under new business at the end.
Yeah.
At the very end, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll hold that. So I'm going to transfer everything over to Mr. Maris for Facilities and Grounds.
Thank you, Mr. Walgamuth. We will go ahead and start with the facility study update by Mrs. James. Go ahead.
So last month, Fidavia came to you and spoke with you about cap reserve plans that we had started in motion. That presentation is attached. So if you want to go back, if you need to go back and refer to that at all, you can do that. And then they also prepared a memo. And this just kind of summarizes what was talked about at the April 30th meeting, talks about the significance of whether, you know, what significance roof and replacement would have, what type of value that has in as far as the replacement, what kind of R value that adds to the insulation. It talks about how that's going to improve the HVAC and so forth. Our roof systems at both, as the resolution we talked about, we felt like there was significant need for the replacement for the two roofs at LPC and LMS, because those roofs are 30 years old. So they've listed out some items here that can help improve some of those, the indoor air quality and things like that, that can improve by the replacement of those roofs. I think we all agreed that it's a win-win if we're in applying for the grants, and so forth. So, I'm not going to go through all of these, but they wanted to put a memo together. If you page down, it also gets into, some of the significant energy savings that you can get into. They've also included, well, there's also sustainability reasons, improvements that can hold. And then at the bottom, there's also some links that you can go to that maybe can help you give you more information about the different items that we're looking at with the capital reserve improvements that we've done, that we're planning on doing. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that.
For the grant that we're applying for, you had to get estimates
That's
to replace.
Yes, that's correct. So I actually had, you have to get at least 3 estimates. We got 4. We just picked from the average of that, what the cost would be. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I did take the lowest responsible bidder.
Oh, okay. We took the most responsible bidder of that. Now, if we can come back and change something, like that does not have to be the end all. If we were awarded the findings, there are things that we can change on that estimate, and update the estimate. We'll have to update it once we get to that point.
And I seem to remember at the last meeting, there's a discussion to be able to do this. You know, even if we got the $3 million tonight, we couldn't get it done this summer. When is the final time frame, I think, for us to approve these estimates to actually get it out on bid? So when school is over, and if I remember, next year we passed a calendar that it's not over till June 4th, 5th or something like that.
Are you asking, will it be able to be done next summer?
Yeah, no, the real question is, when do we actually have to approve these
Yeah.
to get it done next summer? Because it's also my understanding, like at LPC, we actually have bricks up there to keep the roof from blowing away, or pavers on the roof to keep it from blowing away. So, you know, there's the point of, it's great if we get the 3.6 million, that's great, but we still have to do this stuff. And, you know, we can't, in my mind, this is not like the high school where it does make sense to get all sorts of estimates. And if I remember correctly, Centerville Middle School, when we had the week of rain, if I was told correctly, there were like, maybe it's a different building, but there were like 13 buckets collecting.
That was
water.
that was Centerville Elementary.
Elementary school. Okay, that's a whole different project too, but we have, you know, so I guess the question is, we do have to make some decisions and get this approved. And
So in order to apply for the grants, we can't be in the contract. We can't have accepted anything. We can't be under contract in
Okay.
order to apply for them. So we'll have to wait till the grants come through, and then we can make determinations after that
Okay.
point.
all right, so there's a possibility then if the grant, so we're not going to do this till September at the earliest, or
Correct.
it could be later in the fall, which
Correct.
means possibility then that the buildings are going to have to go through 2 years before they would actually.
Well, there is parts of both of the projects. After talking to some of the contractors, there are parts of both of the projects where we need a full tear off of the roof and needs full replacement, only parts of the roof. The other parts of the roof can be replaced with an overlay product. The overlay product has insulation in its layers, shall we say? And so that can be used in some of the areas. If we're talking about areas of the roof that have to be completely torn off, that has to be done over the summer months when students are not here. But parts of the roof that would be done, we would be doing overlay, could foreseeably be done when students are in the building. So it's not a hard line that it has to get done over the summer, that all of it has to get done over the summer.
But there are certain aspects that, again, if you're ripping off as you said, the whole roof.
Correct. That has to be done when the
Can't have
students are not
students and
here.
Staff.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And if we don't get to the approval part until the fall, when we find out what the, if we've got this grant or not, does that give enough lead time?
The
for
contractors,
Summer.
yeah, the contractors that I spoke to have said yes.
So we already bidded we bid the projects out before we got them approved for doing. Is that what we're saying? Because we're gonna have to rebid them out again.
But you have to get bids to ask for the grant, like they won't
Okay.
accept it without.
Okay. We're gonna have to
rebids.
rebid them again because 6 months down the road.
Right, so they're not tying you to that, like you need
Right.
something to be able to substantiate what you're asking for and knowing that it could change.
Yep. Because the other thing is I would really be interested to find out the quality of re-roofing versus replacing the whole roof. I'd like to have a good discussion about that because that's so that's something we need to consider 6 months down the road when we start talking about this.
I agree. I was surprised when they had told me when the roofers had told me that we could, I was anticipated we'd have to tear off all of the roofs.
Sometimes we could and should are two different things.
Right. And so I felt better about their statements, after they did core samples. And they did core samples of both of the roofs to make the determination that they did. So, but yes, we could still could still change that and decide to not do an overlay.
Dumb question, and forgive me if I'm going backwards. If we get a grant to fix the roof, but then we re-roof it with that grant money, is that any kind of violation of grant funds?
As long as the project is the same
Yeah.
and that we're spending at least 25% of our own money to do
Yeah.
it, then we
Okay.
still fall within the guidelines.
That's all, I
Make
can't
sure-
hear you.
Make sure we're not crossing. the
Sure,
line.
I said as long as the project is still the same, that it's a roof replacement or roof remediation, whatever you want to call it, for both buildings. And as long as we're putting in at least 25% of the total costs, then we've met the program guidelines.
I just want to make sure we're not violating anything in there.
I mean, ultimately, partial versus full, they should be able to give us an estimate of lifetime. You look at the incremental cost of the full, and it should be able to say, hey, does that make sense or not from return on investment?
Yes.
I'm just curious because we're talking about LPC and LMS, but Centerville Middle School was mentioned in here too. But we're only applying for those two buildings. How, to back up a little, see it, Centerville Elementary School seems to be like a project equivalent to the high school at this point. It'll move on after the high school doing this, but Centerville Middle School, what do we need to do with that to keep it basically? I guess how's the condition of the roof there? I mean, do we have blocks up there holding down the roof?
I mean,
We do not.
ultimately,
well,
when we get the architect soon and we do the study with the high school and we get some estimates, we're gonna have to make some decisions about everything.
Yeah.
Right now, we need to find out where we're at with the high school. And then I think with the existing capital reserve money and what repairs we need, we're gonna have to come up with a strategic plan on how we're gonna spend the money.
Great.
And, I don't know, Centerville, maybe it makes sense to do something different. I don't know. Well, but I think after we go through the high school project with the architect and we already know what else is needed, we're gonna get together between administration and board, come up with a plan.
Right, so I mean, these got a little bit fast tracked because we had the opportunity to
Right,
apply for the
right.
grant, so we had to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up CMS too. I mean, my daughter is going into the high school next year, but she spent the last 2 years at CMS, and I can tell you that she'd come home from school and blow her nose and the tissue was black. So,
What did you say? I missed that, what you said.
So my daughter would come home from school, blow her nose, and the tissue was like black, dark brown black. And it was just so what's causing that? I don't know. I'm guessing HVAC systems, mold in the air, things like that. So I'm glad you brought up CMS. So we definitely have some things to kind of look at. So no doubt.
Maybe there's some short-term things we can do with the filtration, HVAC. That's first I heard that.
I guess I'm just wondering when we actually, and this is just my own, I don't want to use the word ignorance, but lack of experience. When do we start putting these on as action items to actually decide on these things that are the priority one and priority two items that we've known for months and months now. We know they have to be done. When does it get put on an agenda other than the roof because of needing to approve this resolution tonight for the rebate for it? When do we start moving on some of these other needs at the other buildings, the other schools? We know their needs. When do we decide to do something?
Well, I think that's what I had just tried to explain.
Right.
We're
but
going to look at the high school and then prioritize all the priority 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to figure it out then.
I thought, my understanding was that we were going at 2 tracks parallel. That we were doing a high school track and we were doing other needs track, and that they were operating and we were moving forward with them in parallel.
They're not independent. It's going to depend on what we do for the high school project. We'll prioritize the list for the other schools.
I disagree with, I guess I have to say, I just disagree with that approach. We do need to make decisions on the high school. We need to move on that, yes. But all of these other things, we know these need to be done. We need to start checking them off the list and getting the needs addressed, or they're going to become bigger, they're going to become more expensive, while at the same time talking to the architect about the high school and the cost of a high school repair, replacement, whatever it might be, and or Centerville Elementary School coming into the mix, but all the other things at the 5, 6 other buildings.
Well, it
Still need
doesn't,
to be
it doesn't make any sense to just go ahead and start doing those things when we don't know how we're going to allocate the pot of money. So we don't know what we're doing with the high school. To go ahead with the other improvements without even figuring that out makes no sense.
But deciding on an architect and then finalizing a design and coming to a cost estimate, that's still another 6 months out.
No, I don't know that that's that far out.
I just feel like that some of these things, because of a lot of the work needs to be done over the summer months. So now we're pushing it out another school year and another school year. By the time we take action, approve it, get the bids out, I really feel like we're slow
I
track.
would think by the fall, maybe late fall, we'll know what direction we're going with the high school.
That's 6
And we'll
months.
have enough time to prepare for summer projects, which would include those little projects, which would include the smaller projects, not little. So you're not going to go ahead, I mean, I'm not as a board member going to go ahead and allocate money when we don't even know what we're doing with the high school.
But we know they are needs.
Well,
Like-
yeah, the high school's a need too. It's probably priority 1+.
Everything else, those other things were listed as priority.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but you have to do this strategically, responsibly, financially. You just can't say, oh, I'm going to do these number ones and we'll find out how much the high school is going to call. Oh, too bad. We can't do what we want to do in the high school. We can't, we're not doing number ones overnight. We're not doing them tomorrow.
I don't think that's what,
Having walked through building projects in the past, I would just suggest that we're moving at a reasonable pace. In fact, probably a little faster than what I've seen building projects in school districts go. They are big projects. It's not like you call a roofer in tomorrow and you just do it like you do your home. I don't think we're dragging our feet as a board. I would suggest that we're moving about this at appropriate speed.
I have 2 questions, or one is a comment, one is a question. A comment, I actually thought we were running 2 parallel tracks as well. We got a sheet of paper that listed all of the elementary and middle school, and they said, we'll discuss. And it was said, we are the they, so it was said that was going to be, well, for the other, we would be getting that information about the high school. I thought it was going to be running parallel as needed. And of course, we're going to look at number 1. And then what you're saying is we've got number 1's priorities. And so we have to
But-
blend those together.
It technically is parallel, but there's a pot of money that we can borrow and how much we have in cap reserve until we know what we're doing in the high school. We're-
That is where I'm confused, and I realize that I'm not a big finance person and I don't, but I thought that was part of whatever our planning was and our finances. And why we were looking at how much money we needed to borrow and why we're getting estimates here and there, et cetera. And we can have that discussion later, or more in depth at another time. But but that was my comment. I have a question. This $3 million for 2 schools, how much are those 2 roofs each? It just, what do you think, based on information that you've gotten?
I think it was it 4 million each?
4 million
Not
each.
No, because that 3.5 is
Yeah.
75% of the
Yeah.
subject, of the whole cost.
That's not what it was listed before.
You can
What do you
tell me
mean,
75%, but I'm sorry,
That's 3.5.
75% of 4
sorry.
million? Is that
The,
what we're
the
saying?
resolution's incorrect?
No, so I'm pretty sure the roofs were more than $2 million.
So we did, you're talking about from the feasibility study. We're talking about the bids we just got.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I believe what
Yeah,
Fidavia told
they
us-
were higher. We
But
thought,
Fidavia's told us last month.
you're right.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
right. And we expected these to be a lot higher. That's why.
Came
we
in
only did-
lower, correct?
Than what
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you
Fidavia told
said.
us last month?
They came in under
Yes.
what Fidavia
did.
expected them to come in. These were the actual bids.
Okay.
So I mean, we
Because-
could have potentially done 3 buildings, but we had anticipated that the quotes for just 2 is going to be well above the threshold that you can get a grant for.
Oh.
So we were very surprised that.
Yeah,
we came
also the quote that, or the amount that Fidavia was giving for each of those buildings was to do a complete roof replacement. That's a tear off and roof replacement, where what these roofers are proposing is to do a overlay in much of the roofs.
So I guess going back to the question then, if it came in much cheaper because we're talking about overlay, is that the wise use or should it? Because now we're kind of tied to a
Well,
a
it's
grant.
just a roofing. You don't have to do what's in there.
Right.
That's what the
We
funding is
could have
going to
asked for,
be.
we could have asked for more grant.
We
money.
could, but no one was recommending that when we had
Okay.
the 3 bids.
Okay, so $2 million per roof? Is that what you're saying?
Roughly.
Roughly, yeah.
I mean, I have.
I find that really hard to believe. Just because I have had somewhat experience with a large building. My husband did replacement buildings of a ginormous warehouse, and it cost more than that. And I'm guessing that the school's bigger than the warehouse.
So LPC was 1.7 and LMS was 2.7 roughly. And then there was some contingency and oversight that we could build in as well.
So around 4 million for both?
Yep. So in total with contingency, because they allow you to put 5% contingency in and 2% oversight, it was 4.73 million.
I hope that's correct.
I'm not a roofer, so I don't know.
Okay, that just seems
But I mean, we got 3 different quotes, Linda, that were all in that same ballpark.
Okay.
Well, she had the 4th, but
Right.
I had the last 3.
And so when you do the overlay, I remember Fidavia talking about code and insulation factors and all of
Right,
that. So
so-
the overlay will meet the current code, whatever the current code that's supposed to be.
So if you do, and
roofing.
what was explained to me by the roofer is if they don't have to do a full tear off,
Mhm.
then they don't have to meet the full code.
Okay, so I guess maybe one of my concerns is we've done a lot of repair and we still have a lot of leaks and we have blowaways and people crawling over the roof all the time repairing. Is that what we want? Do we want overlays? I realize it's cheaper, but do we want it where it's not going to meet the code when we have to replace the HVAC? And does that decrease the efficiency of the HVAC or?
Well,
Do you
as I,
understand what I'm saying?
yeah, as I said earlier, I was shocked myself, and that is what with all 4 of them, that was their suggestion.
Now, do they look at the whole? I
We
mean, they're
cover,
looking at the roof. Do they look at? I realize this is tedious for some of you, but I'm just really curious. Do they look at the whole system, the energy efficiency? That's something that we've talked about, the air quality. Believe me, I've lived where it's so dirty. We've lived through that in places we've lived. It's not nice.
so that's where the Corps the core samples that they did came into play. They covered the entire roofs, both buildings, the entire, we were up there for 2 days solid.
Sure. Okay.
So I was surprised myself, but
Maybe-
that was their recommendation.
Maybe as a follow-up, we could have somebody from, that can explain this to us, that why they decided this, with the vendors, we could have somebody talk to us about this to help.
Sure.
So when we would get to that point where we would be actually approving a contract, and we get to that point, we can certainly have someone come in and
Well, I
and
think
talk
you
to
could
us
even
about
bring
that.
them or in earlier to Buildings and Ground just to answer everyone's questions here, because there's a lot of, I think, confusion. So we could bring somebody in, or even if somebody from Fidavia or anyone that understands is an expert at roofing, just to talk to us and answer our questions.
Well, in that document from Fidavia, a lot that he addressed,
Well,
that was
yeah, that's-
addressed in
that's
that
talking
document
ab-
was health and air quality, et cetera.
No, it's talking about advantages, but we're talking about, doing the covering versus the full roof. Maybe we could have somebody chat with us for 15, 20 minutes at the next Buildings and Ground. That'd be great.
I guess, is that something that you can actually do, ask somebody to do if we haven't made an agreement with a particular firm?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
All right. Any more questions for Mrs. James? Did you have anything else to update us on?
I do not.
So just an update with the architect. The committee we went on a site visit a few weeks ago, and the administration is in the process of looking at references. They've checked a couple. They have a couple more to check. I'm going to reach out to the committee members. Hopefully, we can meet together next week. And then we will come with a recommendation to the board to what architect we're recommending, and then that will start this whole process, looking at the high school and get things moving. The other item we have, three other items, paging system update. That's Mr. Graham.
Yep. Just to give you an update and get some final direction on this, we did complete a review of the system with the manufacturer. As I left the last meeting, I said we were getting some quotes on things. We did do that, or did complete that, to basically replace anything that is busted, not working, potentially failing at the high school. We put together a scope of work there. You have the quote in board docs for around $10,000, including labor. That does replace the master clock, some IO modules, some additional admin consoles to address some challenges in the offices. It does still rely on the original system that's in there. That is a point of failure, but it does replace all of the components that are likely causing us problems at this time. We did do an extensive review with Roland to look at installing a new reusable system that we discussed extensively in previous meetings. After looking at that, after looking through the system that's there, the wiring, I've got some photos to show you here in a second. The quote we got back for that was simply too expensive. I wasn't going to bring that back to you, as I did not feel that was a worthwhile investment at this time. Again, based on everything we've discussed previously, at this point, the $10,000 quote there does replace all of the parts that are broken and gets things to a good spot until we get to an actual full building renovation. Just to give you some idea of what we're dealing with over there, since I've never actually shown photos, the system at the high school is absolutely massive, very much resembles an old analog phone system, if you've ever dealt with those. And I think that's where some of that cost of doing a partial replacement came in. It is just such a huge system. There's a lot of unknowns. And I think at the end of the day, for me and for the installer, they did give me an honest number, but I did not feel comfortable going forward with that. So again, putting things to bed, getting things working in a good place for the high school is that lower $10,000 number there to get everything up and running. If there's no objections, I would like to proceed with that as a capital expense to fix things, get things fixed this summer. There was no concern on parts or labor getting things done before the end of the year if we were able to add that to the agenda next month.
How much internal personnel costs is there, additions or overtime? Is it something they're not gonna do that they should be doing?
That's all exterior labor. There's nothing from my
Okay,
department.
because I know in the past, sometimes your department supports those
We,
things.
we do not, we can do some reprogramming, but we generally do not do anything with paging systems just because that's generally a pretty specialized skill, especially with that system in particular.
I had asked that you revisit this, so I appreciate you going back and taking a look at this, Mr. Graham, and I'm comfortable with that amount compared to the 76,000 we originally looked at in a building that was going to go away soon. So thank you.
Yeah, I didn't include the quote, but add another zero up there. It was way higher than even I was anticipating. So like I said, I wasn't even going to bother bringing that back for you.
I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I don't know if anyone else wants to add their 2 cents. It sounds like, is there anybody not in favor of going ahead with this?
Will this be on the June agenda?
Yes.
And that will still give you enough time?
Yeah, there was no concern with that.
Okay.
So.
Okay,
The only other thing, in addition to doing all of this, I did pull together numbers for LPC and LMS since we've discussed both of those. We did complete quotes and scope of works for LMS and LPC since those have been priority items on the feasibility study. There have been identified some dead speakers in both buildings, particularly outside speakers. I did share that we discovered there was no need to replace classroom speakers or wiring in both of these systems. So just to give you an idea on what those replacements would be, we did get full quotes. They're listed there for both LPC and LMS. And just for comparison's sake, I have the feasibility study estimates that were originally produced for both of those as priority 1 and priority 2 items, along with the contingency. Just for clarification, the feasibility estimates did include replacement of the entire building, which is not what we're talking about here. This would just be replacing those classroom or just replacing the head end unit and not the classroom components. So we did get these numbers. I would like to proceed with this, but given the previous conversation, the last agenda item, I don't know if you are interested in doing that, but this is something at some point that is going to have to be done. We did design these quotes to share components between both buildings. To Mr. Wogman's common question, I did not go back and beat them up on labor because this number only came to me last week. I can still do that, but we did design this to get some cost savings from doing both buildings at the same time from the outset.
so the quotes you're proposing are 54,260 for LPC and 62,777.
Yes.
And you're comparing it to the feasibility estimates, which are considerably higher.
Yes, that's correct. And there is $2,000 per building that we would get credited back if it was not needed. But since we don't know exactly how many speakers are dead, we did put that in there just for some unknowns.
My only question for I guess is for the board and administration and for you, Mr. Graham. Does it make sense to look at this as part of some of our other priority items? Are we isolating this and should we be looking at this more in totality? It's just a question.
Am I gathering it's already priority 1 and 2 there? So
Yes,
it's
that's the
part of-
P1 and P2. Yeah, if you go back to the spreadsheets, the P1 number is in the one Fidavia document. I don't think you've ever seen the P2 spreadsheet, but that's the number that they essentially had generated for that.
In other words, essentially my question was, are there some other items on this list that maybe should take priority over this and do we need to manage that? That's a question. I'm not, making a statement with that, just a thought.
You're saying it should be put with the whole group and prioritized.
Well, I just wonder, not looking at this in totality, are there other P1 and P2 items that maybe more, there's more of a need? That's my only question, and I'd need some help with understanding that.
I guess kind of going back to our other conversation, I think we could start picking and choosing projects out of the P1s and P2s. I do think we need to look at it as a whole and then prioritize that. So I'm not sure if there's really that much of a need that we can't do that with that. I think the high school, I think we noted, I mean, sounds like a reasonable, that's more, to me, that's not a capital as much as a repair and maintenance dollar amount and project. So I guess I would kind of with Mr. Waldron with that, we should maybe look at this with the whole for P1s and P2s for those other options.
I guess I'll ask an obvious question. Do the bells work at the high school?
Yes. I
Do
can't
the- does
reprogram
the
them at the moment, but
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
can't reprogram them at the moment, but yes.
So when school opens in the fall, the bells are gonna work?
Yes. Ideally, if nothing else fails, that's one of the pieces of that $10,000 cost that we were going to fix.
And this whole thing is just $10,000
Yes,
for the high school?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can you refresh my memory on, from the feasibility study as to what the greatest problems were with the LPC and LMS systems that prioritized one as a P1 and the other as a P2?
Yeah, and Mrs. James and Mrs. Hall, if you want to jump in here as well, but I mean, the priorities in the buildings are related to looking at the building as a whole, all of the systems in there. So you have the roof, you have HVAC, you have building automation, paging, the wired network, the phone system, every system in the building. When Fidavia and everybody went through it and arranged everything by priority, that was one of the items that landed at P1 for LMS and P2 at LPC.
Mrs. Brady, are you asking what is failing in those
Well, I
buildings?
guess
Is
my
that?
understanding of the feasibility study wasn't that I took the P designations of 1, 2, 3, or wherever we landed as district priorities, not priority per building, that this is an issue at that building, but it's a district priority level 1 or a district priority level 2. Am I misunderstanding that, or is it?
No, so they
one
took
or-
they took it building by building.
They looked at each building, but as we're budgeting, this,
Correct.
I understood the prioritization to be, this should be prioritized in your budget.
Right,
overall.
so like a one is a one regardless of the building.
Right,
So they took
okay.
them as a whole.
Right.
So P1 is the same if it's any building, pretty much. Although there may be some P1s in one building might be higher priority than other P1s, but in general, P1s are urgent and as soon as possible.
Correct,
Right,
yes.
okay.
So the point of clarification, I think in this scenario, we'd be taking these numbers collectively and you would be taking a P1 and a P2 on the list. And there's other P1 priorities. And so I think you just need to understand that when you look at this. I don't disagree that doing projects together can save dollars, but I want to make sure we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul when it comes to a priority 2 on this list. And that's what I mean by looking at it holistically. Because if we use those dollars there, they will not be available potentially for something else.
And I think that's
Right.
true,
right.
that they still might be something we absolutely do, but I think we need to look at the whole, all of the projects collectively and then prioritize how we get them done. Because the other thing is we can't necessarily get every project at the same time in the same building doing it. So we have to stagger projects and things like that. So I think if we look at it as a whole, we can prioritize everything.
I very much have to think about the length, and the length of the projects and the impact in each of the buildings. And am I essentially shutting a building down for the summer and making, and then I also have to think about the other things that are going on throughout the district despite the projects that are going on. And can we still do those other projects? People get upset if they can't have their other activities and things like that. And if I'm cutting them all off, this
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing.
So looking at all the projects would help us better map it out to figure out timeframes and schedules and things like that. If we just pick and choose and cherry pick, we could potentially not or be overlapping and causing problems that we're not seeing at the time.
Right. For instance, this summer, we're taking down I don't want to say taking down, but we're taking 4 buildings. And we're not going to have any air conditioning in 4 buildings.
Sure.
That's significant. So 2 of the 4 will probably be up at partway through the summer. That's our intention, but that's significant.
And I think it's not just the finances, but the logistics is going to be part of this plan, financial and logistical plan and how we do all these projects. And what, sort out the P1s, and some may make sense earlier than others. And, it's a whole, it's going to be a complex thing that I think we resolve here in the coming months.
Are you prepared to give us a map?
That's what I was gonna ask you.
Right now?
No, that's what
Well, I
we're going to
mean,
be
you
doing.
We could give us one right now, knowing how much you work with all of this information.
Well,
But we can't move, it sounds to me like we can't move forward until we have a map.
but that's part of this whole plan.
Yeah, I
With-
understand that, Charles. So I'm
But I don't,
asking her
she's going to be limited based on when she can spend the money for all different projects. Well, she can come up with a plan now, but that might not agree with what we're doing with the high school and other facilities. It's going to be part of the,
our job to look at that sort of. thing.
Right, so that's what we started doing last month with the presentation that Fidavia did. We started laying everything out. This is what needs to be done. Now we're starting to group, so to speak,
Okay.
group some of the projects together so that what we can feasibly do either over the summer or some of the projects could feasibly be done during the school year, and how we separate them at that point and so forth.
And you did give us some of that information, but
Mhm.
in our information we got for this meeting, but we didn't get everything. It's.
And I think having that roadmap
Mhm.
helps us with our financial budgeting then. So we know which year things might be kicking in as far as costs, if we were to approve it. But we can't.
I mean, at some point when these projects are brought, when Mike brings these projects to us and we go, well, we can't do that, but gee, I don't have the information to know where it falls in the priority. We can't make a decision, and it seems like we should be in a position where we can do that, especially since some of this work, in fact, can be done this summer, and we do have the money for that.
Right, so that's some of the steps that we're taking as we've identified all of the projects now, and that's
Right.
some of the steps
Mhm.
that we're taking to identify now which of the projects we can group together.
Mhm.
Because not sure who mentioned it, but it does help sometimes financially to group projects together because we can get better pricing. And so that's what we're trying to determine, what we can group together to get that better pricing and so forth. I think it was brought out about the roof at Centerville Middle School. So one of the reasons I did not incorporate the Centerville Middle School roof in the process of the applying for the grant was because the Centerville Middle School roof is going to also need to have significant work done, or Centerville Middle School is also going to need to have significant work done on the HVAC, heater ventilator units or the heat pump units in closets in the classroom. That's also going to play a part in the roof. So I don't want to go down the roof or the road of replacing the roof when I know that that's going to play a significant part. So it just didn't make sense to group those together.
Is this in our budget for this year for capital, Mr. Graham? Do you know?
This is all feasibility spending.
All
This wouldn't be
feasibility
budgeted,
spending.
yeah.
Would it be asking too much to consider adding this to our budget for the upcoming year, in the capital portion and plan for it? And that would give us time to look at these P1, P2s as a holistically, or is that, you look puzzled?
I mean,
I mean, we do have some capital stuff budgeted, but the rest comes out of capital reserve. I can redo the budget if that's.
No, I'm not asking anybody to redo anything. Maybe you do it a little different than I'm used to. I'm used to people presenting their capital projects and they get approved as part of the budget for the following year. And then anything outside of that becomes an emergency fund or a request in this case. So maybe I'm misunderstanding how we go about that.
I understand what you're saying. I think this gets back to the whole roadmap of what we're going to do, P1, P2, and the capital plan that goes with it. So I think that all kind of goes together. As we know how they're going to be kind of grouped together, bucketed together, we can start to lay that out over the course of, it's going to take many years, right?
I
So
think I'd
that
feel a
comes
little
about.
better if we had a little better of a roadmap related to this as it connects with everything else that we need to do. Not that this isn't important. But, and this feels different than the high school because it is a building we plan to stay in and it's not going to get renovated or demolished.
Yeah, regardless, I appreciate I don't know what the word is, like the looking ahead and the information about LMS and LPC, because I think with the high school, when the paging system went down, a lot of people are saying, where did this come from? Where did this come from? So this is informative for us as a board. And I think great to have well in advance and to be thinking about, because I remember that coming up with the high school discussion.
And as you're grouping these together, is it, how did you say, projects are linked together, sharing some control components?
Yeah.
Does that affect, would even though they're the same stuff, does the pricing get affected if we would do the P1 and then do the P2 later, even though they're, I don't know if that's a technical feasibility.
I'd have to look at how they broke the numbers out. There's components that are shared, but if you did, it depends which one they put some of the servers and things into. I think it probably wouldn't change the end number considerably.
Okay.
There's probably some labor savings by doing everything at the same time from a scheduling perspective, but without asking and getting it redone, I couldn't tell you. It probably wouldn't be that different.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Graham? So let's move on to the next item, which is the CES Gaga Pit. I think that's you, Mrs. James.
Sorry.
While he's getting the slide, one of the things I also I just thought of and I wanted to update you with, I had reported to you a month or two ago that the underground oil tanks had been removed from Landisville Primary Center and the middle school. And at that point, I was reporting that there was no reason to believe that there was any contamination in the ground, but I couldn't report it fully because I didn't have the results back. I do have the results back now. There was no contamination. So we have, it was that 136,000 that was part of that quote will not be charged to us for that job. So Centerville Elementary School is looking to jump on the Gaga Pit bandwagon as some of the other schools are doing as well. And so they are looking to install or purchase and install a Gaga Pit. This is the same exact Gaga Pit that the other buildings have also installed. If you move on to the next. This is just showing you different versions of the Gaga Pit. The next slide gives you the total for the Gaga Pit, the different components of the pit that they would be purchasing. And then the last slide actually tells you where they'd be placing the pit. This is going to be purchased by their PTO, and so will be treated as a donation.
Any questions? Gaga Pit?
How many schools will this make that now have these pits?
We have one at Landisville Intermediate Center, Mountville Elementary, Farmdale, East Petersburg, and now CES.
Okay, and we've just been buying them one at a time? So
The,
that
the PTOs have been
PTO.
purchasing, but yes.
I understand that. I guess what I'm getting at is, if this is becoming a trend, should we sort of just go to the PTOs of whatever school don't have them yet and say, are you gonna get a Gaga ball pit? And if so, let's get them all in one order and maybe save a little bit of money through some sort of bulk purchase.
I guess that would depend on their financial situation as well.
Have we asked?
I have not, no.
Can we?
And it very much depends on the principals as well. I think the principals, some of the principals may not be interested in doing that. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if we're gonna, I mean, I think it's a great idea. It's not a lot of money, but if we're gonna keep doing this, then let's do it systematically instead of each PTO sort of just whenever they feel like getting one, then they come to us and we're dripping them out.
Yeah. I think Roarstown and Landisville Primary Center are the only ones we have left. So
Okay, well, could
Yeah,
we
we-
check with them and?
certainly, yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
reach out to their PTOs to see if they want to Get them? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
we
Mr. Keener,
What
I'm not sure that's, PTOs have their own thing, and I'm not sure that's our realm of
I'm
doing
just trying to
things.
save them money here.
I know, but they work in completely different entities, and not going to go into, they just do things differently. I'm not sure that's really the district's thing to ask
Okay.
them.
Because what's gonna happen is soon we're gonna have one school that doesn't have a Gaga pit because one PPO doesn't have money. And then someone's gonna show up and say, we should buy a Gaga pit for that school.
Well, and we can say yes, we could say no.
I do have a.
Buy one,
question.
get one free option for the last two.
What's that?
Buy one, get one free for the last two.
I do have a question. If we end up doing, if we will be doing some renovations, are these things portable? Can they be
Yes.
moved to different parts?
Yes.
Okay. And then for the maintenance, like it has rubber flooring, we know that that has to be replaced periodically. The PTO is still responsible
That's
for
correct.
any repairs, replacements.
That's correct. And the exterior of the exterior walls of the Gaga pit are made of a Trex material. So there's lower maintenance on that sort of material.
Thank you.
All right, last topic, sheds on district property.
Sure.
So we periodically get requests from different groups, PTOs, to put sheds on our property. And we were having discussion as a committee, whether that was something the board fully supported. Should we continue to bring these one by one? Because maybe just like the Gaga pit, you're starting to notice they're coming on more and more. Just what what the board's stance is on placing sheds on our property. We do have a standard, model that we allow. Kim will always approve the placement of them. But is that something we want to continue to entertain? We just want to know as we start to get the request, should we just continue to bring them one by one? What is,
What are these sheds for? I thought we had storage. but-
PTO is purchasing sheds for their equipment. So for instance, some of them have supplies that they use for their the Fun Fest, things like that, different activities that they sponsor, they'll put their supplies in there because there really isn't room in the buildings to put that sort of thing.
What
And-
does a,
There's not some central storage area? Don't we have that old gymnasium over at Roystown and there's a central storage area that we can make available?
That storage area over there is very full. We have district-wide supplies in that storage area.
Yeah, and again, they're not going to haul things from Farmdale to Morristown. I mean, I think.
Okay, then why are we here? Okay, I mean, why are we having this conversation? If we're not gonna have a conversation about it, then why is this an agenda item? I'm sorry, Mr. President, but I mean, if the PTOs
can
are
have
acting
conversations,
autonomously,
but-
if the PTOs are acting autonomously and don't care what we say, then let's not waste our time. If we have input, then let's talk about it.
Well, they have to care what we say to a certain extent because it's the property, it's the property of the school that they're asking to put their stuff on. So we've got to give them the yay or the nay. They're not gonna you know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna put up, like, every school, all 7 elementary schools aren't gonna use Roarstown to house all their stuff. It doesn't make sense.
Know how much stuff they have.
I can tell you firsthand, it's a good amount of stuff.
Yeah, I think-
Each school's gonna have a whole bunch, and I can tell you at CES, they use a couple different storage areas that also, by the way, are used by custodial staff and the principal. And so suddenly now you have this hodgepodge. It looks like, have you ever see the show like Hoarders? It's approaching that. So if you can give them something that is exclusive to them, that they have control over, as long as we're okay with them putting it somewhere, I'm cool with it. As long as they're paying for it, they're maintaining it, and it's being overseen the right way. I personally,
Then
Fine,
maybe
good
that's
thought.
the issue. Maybe they have too much stuff.
do we
Could
have,
I-
do we just have a policy that says if it's not maintained, like, do we have parameters that we can say, hey, you need to fix this, replace it, move it? Do we have a policy like that in place?
I don't know that there's a policy in place. We have told them when the different buildings that do have have purchased sheds, we've told them that they have to maintain them. First of all, it has to meet a certain, it has to look like the rest of the sheds that we have throughout the district. We give them kind of an idea of this is what type of shed it needs to be. It can't be something that they're putting together and building. And so it has to look like the rest of the sheds, but, yes, they're told they have to maintain it.
Well,
Yeah.
my suggestion is that we just put a document together that spells some of that out more so, because my maintaining it might be different than Mr. Wagner's maintenance of it, right? So I think we need to spell that out, and then it's much more fluid, much more easy, right? Spell out what, like, the parameters, so many feet, so many height, whatever it is. I think that should be part of the process, and then it should be like, do they meet it? Yes, and then can we kick them out? Because it's not just PTOs, it could be
Sure.
a sports club, it could be anybody, right?
Sure.
Hey, they haven't painted for 5 years.
We
We're-
created our own HOA is what you're saying, Mr. Miller.
Basically.
And by the way, Mr. Keener, this is where your bulk purchase situation could potentially come into play. It's great.
Is that why
So
it came
save some
up?
Money, save a couple hundred.
Question, was there a lot of requests
So
all
we're
at
gonna
once?
make them source all the sheds from one place?
I just think we need to remember, PTOs we're partners with, they're good. We're partner with them. I doubt if any elementary school would like to see their PTOs upset, angry, or stop functioning. So when we say, oh, we don't need to spend time doing that, we don't want to put that stuff in central locations because each PTO purchases they own that equipment. When you put something in a central warehouse, whoever controls that warehouse needs to have ownership over that. So if I have a grill and we use it at the Fun Fest, I don't want, and I'm at Centerville, I don't want to go over to a central place and find out Farmdale took my grill. So I think what they're asking for is reasonable. I agree with what you're saying, just to make sure, that it always looks nice and suitable and uniform. And then they can put their stuff in it. And PTOs can be kind of hoarders, but they also know how to go through and get rid of stuff too. When their shed is full, they will go through it and go, well, maybe we don't need this thing from 1930. So,
So I have
don't
a
see
couple
problem
questions.
with it.
Couple questions. So I like what Richard said, a simple document. Kind of like we lease out, the fields and we have different agreements. Is there any possibility, like if they put one of these sheds in, something gets stolen, are we liable? If the shed in a windstorm blows over, could it damage stuff on our property? Is there any insurance implications for the school district?
We put that in the document, no.
Well, what I'm saying is there, are we liable if somebody gets hurt because of contents or I'm just asking questions. We don't want to get in a situation where,
Yeah, I would, like they said, I would think that would be something that we can include in a document, that we're not liable, the school district is not liable for any issues like that.
Do they carry insurance for their belongings?
No?
But that's up to them. We can just say
Yeah.
that we require a lock or whatever it is, and
I mean,
Probably
are we
secure.
limiting? I mean, somebody said a gas grill. Are we going to let them have propane tanks in these things? And does that make us liable of fire starting or I'm just thinking of maybe worst case scenarios, but they
I
can
wouldn't
always happen.
advise it.
I mean, it's all maybe, like, it depends on what happens. Could we be liable? Sure. You don't know what, what's gonna happen. We've had sheds for a long time now. Have we had a lot of these issues?
I'm sorry, have we what?
We've had sheds on our property for some time.
Right.
Have there been issues?
No.
I would say stuff like propane and chemicals, we shouldn't allow them to store them.
I would agree. I would
Okay.
agree.
And that could be part of that.
Part of that
That could be
document.
part of that write-up, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what's the sense?
Are we appointing a board committee to draft the document about PTO storage facilities? Is that?
No, I think we can trust the administration.
That's exactly what I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
we
Mr.
don't-
Donato.
We don't have to, we'll get the administration to draft something. So is the sense that we want is everybody in favor or they want this draft document put together and then approve it, or where's the
I
board?
think if it's just standard guidelines, doesn't have to be a policy or anything.
No, I didn't mean a policy, just
Yeah.
some guidelines.
Just so you can put it in board news, we can look at it. And not,
So at this point, everybody's in favor of moving ahead.
Yeah.
Anybody not? Anybody not in favor? Okay. Very good. So you'll put something together and somehow feedback back to the board. All right, there are no building and grounds action items. There is an other action item
do
to
you,
approve.
do you want me to take over from, are you all right?
Yeah, special education plan. Go ahead.
Okay, this, for the next thing, if you remember back at 2 weeks ago at the education policy program, the special ed plan was presented and we have to approve it at this point. So I'm asking for a motion to approve it. And a second, we can have discussion. Motion. Thank you, Mr. Garber. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnston. Any discussion? This is what we saw before and it has to be done by the end of the month. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, I believe the motion carries 9-0. And then we'll go on to new business, was it now the resolution? Mr. Graham, are you able to? Thank you. I saw you and Mr. Keener
Mr. Graham, it is also in your,
Yeah,
board docs.
I appreciate you pulling it up because I couldn't find it in my board doc, so thank you.
Hit refresh.
It's attached to new business items in board docs if you refresh.
Yeah, oh, that's up at the top.
Yeah, it is there. Thank you.
I would move that the board approve, the resolution as posted.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
I just want to say these are great comments by the public speakers as well as the other board members. I've been on the board for a while and this has been a very frustrating issue, the funding formula. And I think this is obviously a good idea. I will talk to the IU. I wasn't there this past month because graduation was the same day, but I'll bring the topic up. I think if collectively we can do larger groups, I think the legislature may look at it further and in answer of, yeah, I think if we got a couple thousand people up at the Capitol building talking about this, maybe they'd start to listen, but I mean, the court case said, hey, you're not doing it right, but we're still not doing it right. So the more we can do and contacting our congressmen and stuff, but this has been this way for a long time and it's very frustrating, but if maybe we get bigger numbers and larger groups of schools, they'll start to listen.
Mr. Maris, when you have the conversation, you can say, assuming we pass this, that we have a model that you'd be more than willing to share. If we could get that might be probably the most effective thing if you could get all 16 districts or the other 15 to pass the identical thing.
And I could certainly ask the question. I don't know. They may have reluctance for whatever reason. And keep in mind, I don't think we're talking about, most of our schools are fairly, even in Lebanon County, are well-to-do, but you get up in the counties where things are impoverished, they run the risk of getting less money with something like this.
I think if I remember, this was first discussed when I came on the board, that they were talking about doing this. And with this, if I remember correctly, we would have either initially, I think it was, we'd either gain $500,000 or lose $500,000. But there are some school districts in Lancaster County, if I remember correctly. And again, this is now 6 years ago, because that's when I started on the board, like Solanco would lose big time money with this. So I think part of this is the adequacy thing is keeping it so districts, whether it's in Lancaster County or Potter County, at least maintain the same level they currently have. So that is an important part of this, that districts aren't losing funding, but they may not continue to. It's more equitably distributed.
Yeah, it is a
Yeah.
very, as you said, it's very sensitive because if you're a school district and they put the formula in and you're finding out you're going to lose a lot of money, are you going to be in favor of doing it?
But again, I don't think any districts stand to lose money. I think that's a misconception. More districts will. I think the number is somewhere around 90%. I could be really wrong. I'm not a numbers person. That the vast majority of districts will gain money. Some will not gain, but they will maintain.
I'm not sure that's correct. I'm not
pretty
sure that's
sure-
correct.
I'm pretty sure. it
Well,
is.
if you can show me some numbers, but there's plenty of
I think-
schools in the more
I
rural areas of Pennsylvania that are going to stand to lose money. And that's why this thing called hold harmless. That's why we're only implementing what, on the new money, the formula. If they would do the formula on the whole bulk, I think there'd be some significant number of schools that will lose substantial money.
Mr. Keener.
I think these are exactly the reason that we asked the superintendent to go back and
Right.
revise the resolution,
this.
because we're not sure what the exact ramifications of the BEFC are. So this, and it supports the concept of adjusted school funding without committing this board to a course of action that I think most of us do not, or none of us fully understand.
Agreed. I think that was well said, Mr. Keener. That's why I can support this, but we don't know what we're supporting and what resolution we're putting out there that could hurt us or other districts or create more inequity around the funding situation. I wouldn't want to put that in front of legislators. So I think this covers us. It sends the message that we needed to send, and it's generic enough that it doesn't lock us into something that could hurt us that none of us fully understand.
It basically tells our legislature, get to work and fix this. It doesn't tell them how to do it, tells them to do it.
I would also say if you're going to take it to the other boards to see if they would be interested. I know Mrs. Small has gone and done presentations in other school districts already specific to their funding. She's very well versed in detail on this with Ed Voters, and would be available to go to any other districts to lay out their specific situation for them.
I would ask, maybe I missed this, but where's PSBA in all of this?
Great question.
I
can
guess I'm
find
looking
out.
to our
I can
rep.
find out. I can find out.
Because really, if somebody's going to be coordinating efforts, it really shouldn't necessarily have to be us. Not that we can't do it, but really, where's PSBA in all of this?
I think.
I mean, we pay our dues to them. They should be the ones driving the bus on this, and I haven't heard a lick from any of them related to it, unless I missed it.
If it's like one we passed a few years ago, that was about charter schools. It was something they represent. Again, this is generic, and I think if they're doing it across the district, as we're coming into the budget, or across the state as they're coming in, it would help them to be able to say, look, we got 400 school districts out of the 500 have passed some sort of budget resolution supporting fair and adequate funding with it.
Mrs. Brady, I appreciate that offer. I think initially it'll just be, what do you think about this idea? And then explore more. Most of the board members like us are pretty familiar with this whole BEF formula and the problems. And in fact, when I first went on the IU board, there was someone that I think it was actually a former superintendent in a group that was going around all these different areas of the state to try to promote to get this done. And I think that fizzled probably about 10, 11 years ago. So I'm just going to bring up the idea and see if there's a appetite. And then from there,
My suggestion was just that if there is an appetite and they're looking for more information.
Yeah,
that's what
understood. Thank you for the offer. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Resolution passed and is adopted 9-0. One thing I will ask, since this passed If it's possible somehow to get a copy printed out that we could actually sign it below before you leave tonight, because again, it would be good to have all 9 signatures on there. There's not really lines, but I think we could fit it on there. And with that, upcoming meetings, there's a schedule listed. And with that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries 9-0 and we're adjourned.
So are we getting a copy? We need to stay and sign it? Is that what?